Protecting the world's important heritage sites in times of conflict. The UN cultural body UNESCO is holding a meeting in Doha to address the issue. But can one organisation alone save the legacy of humanity? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zaidan. Well, thousands of people have been killed or injured in the war in Syria, as we know. The conflict has also taken a toll on the country's cultural and historical buildings. All 6 of Syria's World Heritage sites have been put on an endangered list by the UN's cultural organisation. Now, that organisation, UNESCO, is holding its 38th annual meeting here in Doha. The goal? To find a way to save important heritage sites, not just in conflict zones, but in other parts of the world too. We'll discuss this issue with our guests in a moment. But first, this report from Carolyn Malone.
This is the ancient city of Samarra in Iraq. It's one of the world's best preserved Islamic sites. In 2007, it was added to the UNESCO list of World Heritage Sites that are in danger. The area dates back to the 9th century and includes the Al-Askari shrine, considered to be one of the most sacred for Shia Muslims. But there are fears it may be damaged, along with other UNESCO-listed sites, as Sunni rebels fight for control of the area.
There's many reasons for to put this site in danger list. One of them is to allocate the assistance or direct fund from the community itself, from the World Heritage, and then also to let the international community aware of what's happening.
This video appears to show armed Shia groups heading towards Samarra last week to protect the shrines there. An international ban on selling cultural objects from Iraq was introduced in 2003. That's helped to stop the trafficking of some important cultural objects after previous waves of violence and looting. But that's not yet the case with Syria, very rich in cultural heritage and home to 6 World Heritage sites, despite 3 years of war. One of them is the ruins at Palmyra, a 1st to 2nd century city at the crossroads of several civilizations.
For Syria, there is no such resolution so far. And this is something that the international community can do to block, for example, illicit trafficking of cultural objects, which is blooming in the countries that are, bordering Syria.
The northern Iraqi city of Erbil is one of 36 new places being considered for protection under UNESCO. The UN's cultural body is holding its 38th annual World Heritage Conference in the Qatari capital, Doha. The 21 committee members in this hall will decide over the next few days which new places should be on UNESCO's list. They've already expressed grave concern at the violence in places like Syria and Iraq. UNESCO's Director General has called on Iraqis to be united to protect their cultural heritage, because not only is it a testimony of humanity, but will help rebuild the country after all the violence. Caroline Malone, Al Jazeera, Doha.
Well, let's bring in our guests here in the studio. Joining me is Neda Al Hassan. She's the chief of the Arab States unit at UNESCO, and Alec Ma, a World Heritage consultant. Good to have you both with us here in the studio. If I could start with Neda, are you able to protect World Heritage sites in places like Syria that you're responsible for, a place where it's difficult to survive, let alone worry about culture and heritage?
Well, we can't protect heritage under war during the conflict, but we can certainly take measures to mitigate risks, and we can take measures to limit illicit trafficking. So there are things that you can do during the conflict, but a lot also can be done immediately in the recovery phase.
But if we take during the conflict, what can you do? Let's take, for example, Aleppo, beautiful city, historical site, almost bombed to pieces.
Yes, you are right. In this case, the international community that is represented in this forum, the World Heritage Committee, is a bit, without means to intervene, because the conflict is very much alive there. What we do is call on all parties not to use sites for military reasons, to call on parties to block access to high-rise architectural elements like minarets that are destroyed in the conflict, and you can certainly work a lot to block illicit trafficking that is taking place in Aleppo and its area, and this is done with Turkey.
Is anyone listening to you when you make those calls?
Yes, the Turkish government, for example, is making a lot of efforts to intercept illicit trafficking on its border and to keep, the looted objects they find, of course. But parties in the conflict now in Syria, no, they are not answering our calls, unfortunately.
Now, Alec, you work lobbying governments to pay more attention and respect to World Heritage sites. How much impact does it have when UNESCO says this site is on our World Heritage List or this site is on our World Heritage Danger List?
Well, a lot of it depends entirely on the circumstances. I think in first world countries where you have a strong civil society, a basically stable government, then, and particularly if it's a democratic regime, then it can be very powerful because state parties, governments, can't survive in some circumstances if it's clear that they're destroying World Heritage sites. So it often, in places like my own country, Australia, becomes a huge battleground between people in civil society who are trying to stop some damaging activity and the government of the day. And if the committee itself calls on the international community to do something about the damage that's occurring in that site, it can have a very powerful impact. In a place like Syria at the moment, where things are very fluid and difficult, it's very hard to get people to pay attention. But there are times in more less threatening circumstances where you can actually negotiate with both sides and say, look, if you guys have to have conflict, don't have it around World Heritage sites. Now that seems a bit of a stretch, but it does happen on occasion. And that's where we really need to get. In many of these conflict zones, although you have the two combating sides, often they are being supported in one form or another by other governments outside the borders.
So the governments are sort of the key, is what you're saying?
Well, they are one of the keys. Civil society will always play an important role, and the way that I see UNESCO is they are like a monitoring mechanism and a coordinating mechanism. And if they can alert people to the problem, bringing the state parties together, they often make significant progress.
Okay, but are you expecting too much from UNESCO? At the end of the day, you said that governments are the key, or one of the keys. Let's not forget, UNESCO is part of the United Nations, which is basically the body which is civil servants of the world governments.
Oh, look, you're absolutely right.
Are we going round in a bit of a circle here?
Well, yes, but at UNESCO, the key here is to protect heritage. So that's the dialogue. It's not about war or not war. It's, okay, whatever else is going on, what can we as state parties do to protect culture in the process?
All right. Nada, is the process of deciding which sites make it to the World Heritage List and which sites make it to the World Heritage Danger List, do you feel sometimes they're too politicised? You know, countries at the end of the day, they lobby hard to say we want these sites on our list, and they lobby hard to keep other sites which they're not looking after off the danger list. Well,
the World Heritage Committee is a technical body that is supported by what we call the advisory bodies. Advisory bodies for culture, advisory bodies for nature. The advisory bodies come in with proposals, technical proposals with their own expertise and multidisciplinary expertise on both natural and cultural sites. They propose their recommendations for inscription or for danger listing or for, just the state of conservation, monitoring, etc., to the committee, and this is where the discussion takes place. It is true that we have witnessed in the last years a sort of politicization of the debate because we are in the real world. But what is true also is that the committee often reminds, and some members of the committee, and at least our constituency and the Director General of UNESCO always remind the committee before any meeting, as this World Heritage Committee meeting takes place, that this is a technical forum which aim is really to protect sites and to accept them on the list only when they have an outstanding universal value, because when you don't, you discredit the ones that do have a value.
And these committee members, they're autonomous.
I think...
Yes, they are. They are.
No.
There are 21 members that are rotating, you know, every 2 years.
All right, Alec.
Look, I think that was a very diplomatic answer. And it was
So
basically
if you're not the
accurate, but-
diplomat, what would you say, Alec?
Well, I would say that the quality of the decision-making of the committee depends on the countries who are making up the committee at any time and the quality of the delegations. And I think I've been going to these meetings since 1997. I've seen some absolutely brilliant committees, and I've seen some that I thought did some very shameful things. I think that we're about halfway through this meeting here in Doha, and this is a new committee. There was an election back in November last year. About a third of the committee changed, and I am very impressed with the committee we currently have. I think it's the best World Heritage Committee in more than a decade, and they are now starting to push the politics back out of the committee, push the technical side, support the technical advisory bodies, and as a result, the pressure on state parties to perform is increasing for the first time in a decade.
And yet, if we look at some of the NGOs, like the World Monument Fund's list of the 100 endangered sites, they're sometimes so different from UNESCO's list. At one point, 79 places on the World Monument Fund's 100 endangered list were not. Well, not only were they not on UNESCO's list of World Heritage Sites, they were not on UNESCO's even endangered list. They were on none of UNESCO's list. Why is that? What does that say?
Well, look, that's a fabulous question, but I'm not the right person to answer.
No, but you see, we come back to member states here, because the World Heritage List is a voluntary list. It's not a list where you say, how come, I don't know, the Eiffel Tower is not on the list? It's not like that.
So you can only act when a government says.
Yeah, governments say, this is the inventory of my country's heritage. This is what I consider as important. And this year, I would like to submit the inscription for this particular file.
Okay, what about the endangered list, though? That is supposed to be one that you monitor,
yes, of course,
manage.
But
right?
the endangered list is when what we call the outstanding universal value of a site is threatened. For World Monuments Fund, any cultural heritage of importance, even if it's not on the list or on the tentative list, which is the way to listing, is of significance, and thus they can put it on the danger list if they think that there are development pressures or wars or whatever, you know, mining or whatever threats there can be. So they have different criteria for their own list and for their danger listing. It's a different process.
Just on endangered listing, it is a very important tool. And I'll give you an example. At this meeting here, the government of Tanzania asked for Selous Game Reserve World Heritage Site to be put on the endangered list. And the reason for that is they have poaching which is spiralling out of control. They have a whole range of issues that they are incapable of solving by themselves. And by putting it on the endangered list, it's a beacon to the international community to say this state party needs help, because World Heritage is the common responsibility of humanity. We've got over 190 governments who are signatories to this convention, and so when a site goes on the World Heritage List, it's reasonably expected that all those signatories make an effort to help the state party do the job.
Oh, is it only about needing help and helping the party?
Well,
what about your native Australia, where there's discussion now about putting, you know, some of the areas on the endangered list, like the Great Barrier Reef?
Yeah.
That isn't to help Australia, is it? That's more of a warning.
Well, that's right, and it should be. One thing to understand about the Australian political system is we've got a two-party system there effectively, and one party is generally supportive of World Heritage, one is generally antagonistic to World Heritage. And right now we have an extremely antagonistic government who's doing the wrong thing in all World Heritage sites, and the international community is going to have to hold Australia accountable if we want to protect World Heritage Sites in Australia, and that's one of the reasons I'm here. We have an outrageous attack on the Tasmanian World Heritage Area, where basically a couple of political mad dogs have decided to attack our World Heritage Site. They're attacking the advisory bodies, they're attacking the World Heritage Convention. And civil society is mobilising in Australia and around the world to protect our World Heritage Sites from a government which is out of control on World Heritage Sites.
All right, very clear here, Alec is not a, shall we say, a 100% believer in governments looking after the environment and cultural heritage of the world. What about areas like we've got now emerging in this part of the world, in the Middle East, which don't seem to be under an increasing swath of land between Syria and Iraq, doesn't seem to be under any state actor control? How do you deal with that sort of scenario in an area, you know, Mesopotamia, very rich with world history, civilization, culture? Yeah. Who do you talk to?
Well, you know, strangely enough, on the ground, there are people who are doing their job. And
really? Between Syria and Iraq in the midst of who?
I can tell you that in Syria
what
there are young 911. There are people in Syria, young archaeologists, young architects, who are there, you know, going to, for example, the Umayyad Mosque, which minaret was destroyed. Everybody saw this. They went there and built a wall that protects decorations of the mosque. They built a concrete wall just, you know, a few centimeters away for it not to be damaged in future street fights or so.
Okay, but hang on. The Umayyad Mosque, that's in government, that's in areas close to government control. I'm talking about areas...
No, it's not. This is not.
Right.
This is not. The old city of Aleppo is not under government
That's
control.
true.
The citadel is under the governmental control. And I can tell you also that the Directorate of Antiquities, which is based in Damascus, is doing a great job, and it's doing it also with people in areas that they do not control. So there is a real mobilization of the experts. And at the end of May in Paris, we organized a meeting for all experts on Syria, including Syrian experts from all political orientations. And I can tell you that they really worked hand in hand to see how they can work to protect heritage under the terrible situation they're in. And they all talked together and decided together on how to distribute responsibilities. So yes, you can do things with people. You can do them, you know, with decisions. You can do them on the ground with people who are ready to intervene.
And another good example of similar thing was in many of these endangered sites, say in the Democratic Republic of Congo, even though the government doesn't have control, rangers still go to work every day trying to protect the gorillas and all these other wonderful wildlife that are there. And every now and again, a rebel group comes through and kills half of them. And then they bury their friends and they get up the next day and they go back to work.
So who manages people like that?
Well, in Congo...
Who funds them? Who pays your salary if you're running around?
In Congo, UNESCO paid the salaries of the rangers for several years.
Yes.
We really supported Congo a lot during the crisis, and we continue to do so. We have also gathered around the table with our Director General parties to the conflict 2 or 3 years ago. We are really doing diplomatic efforts on one side and, you know, real actions by arming rangers and you know, training them in order to be effective there.
Well, this might be an interesting segue into the question of reform, of the way not only that UNESCO but organizations handle the issue of managing World Heritage sites. Is it time to think, rather than about one organization, UNESCO, sort of trying to manage everything itself, to look at UNESCO as more of maybe as the organization that supervises and provides support for a network of international, local institutions and actors?
But that's really what it does now.
Well, it's been criticized for being too bureaucratic.
Well, every organization has its drawbacks, and you know, big organizations are bureaucratic. But I can tell you that in UNESCO, through this very instrument, the World Heritage Center and Convention, we are, you know, a group of technicians working very closely with site managers, with governments, with NGOs, and with all actors on the ground in order to protect heritage. And I don't think that the bureaucracy is winning over us. I think we're doing a real job on the field with the people, and we are really heard, and our voice is heard. And as you were saying, we really can make a difference. When UNESCO says this is veto, we veto this, it weighs, and that's why, you know, there's politicization. Else nobody would care.
So is there no need for reform, Nada? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that bureaucracy is part of you know, what we are, but this doesn't make us ineffective and doesn't make what we do, you know, useless on the ground.
No, look, it's a UN body, and the UN is quite bureaucratic. There's no doubt about that. But I really think that UNESCO does a remarkable job with very small resources. And if you look at the other conventions that people sign up to, I think the World Heritage Convention is far and away the most effective. And it's not just effective because UNESCO is effective, because it is, but it's because UNESCO coordinates the efforts of thousands of brilliant professionals, very courageous people, who are out there doing their best to protect heritage sites, even in conflict zones. Now, I don't think we can actually ask too much more than that. It may not be perfect, but I think it actually does a good job. It can be reformed, there's no doubt about that. I can think of 100 ways to improve it.
Right,
but if you compare it to many of the others, it's way ahead.
You use the words there, it does a good job with few resources.
Yes.
Why does it get few resources? We know that some countries don't
Heritage
even
always
pay their
gets-
dues.
That's exactly right. Heritage
Well,
always
is there a
gets-
way to get people more, and countries more interested, enthusiastic
Yes, there
about
is.
cultural?
And that is, the job is to publicise the World Heritage Convention. These are the most stunning places on the earth, ever. Simple. You know, we're not going to get another Grand Canyon, we won't get another volcanoes of Kamchatka, we won't get another set of the pyramids of Giza.
But countries know that, though. I think their usual argument is this body is not effectively using the reason, whether it's a reason or an excuse, but the logic goes that UNESCO is not effectively looking after these sites, therefore
I think there's been a failure to, on behalf of everybody associated with the convention, to bring enough people in civil society in. It actually happens. Like right now there are millions of people writing correspondence on a number of World Heritage sites around the world right now. But it's not a consistent thing that's then used to persuade governments to prioritise things in budgets. And that's really the shortfall.
You know, it's not like that UNESCO is, you know, like a compact body, and then there is the world, and then we go and save or protect all heritage sites in the world. It's not like that. We are managing a convention that sets rules, and when you, as a country, are signatory to a convention, then you have to abide by the rules.
Right.
And then you have mechanisms to put those rules in place. We are the ones who say, watch out, you are not abiding by the rule, and let's work together to better manage your site, to you know, refrain from building this high-rise building next to your World Heritage site, refrain from mining in a forest, So what we do, we are a sort of, you know, standard setting
But you're also
body.
involved in campaigns, haven't you, in your history? You've raised money
We
for
do,
relocating
and we
monuments,
restore,
right?
And we
So you're kind of involved in managing projects as well.
Yes, we are, but you know, it's not. Our resources are, of course, linked to the scale of things that we can do, but our resources are not as important as what we represent and what the leverage that we can get. So, and this is where we are effective. It's by saying no. The standards are those standards, and we don't do it alone. We do it with advisory bodies that are armed with, you know, a network of experts worldwide who know everything. And a lot of, I mean, we are in the middle of a network that we deal with.
I'll give you a good example. The barrier reef is under threat. This current Australian government is making everything worse, and their intention is to make it even worse. I believe right now that endangered listing for the barrier reef in Australia is inevitable on the current trajectory that this current national government is heading. But because UNESCO has said they're concerned, they've talked about the damaging activities the Australian government is approving, and the result is Deutsche Bank and HSBC have said we won't invest in any of the developments that are threatening the Great Barrier Reef.
All right, I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. It's been a great discussion. Let's thank our guests here in the studio, Nadan Hassan from UNESCO and Alec Ma, World Heritage Consultant. And you can add your voice to this discussion online at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story or go to @AJ Inside Story on Twitter. I'm Sami Zaidan. Thanks for watching. It's goodbye for now.